You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
All right, here we are, episode 3 of the week, middle of the week, time for more Engage. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau, and today is what
Hump
day?
day. All right. So you made it. We made it. We're plowing toward the weekend. But here we go. As always, we're engaging with your comments, your emails, your questions. And Norm, you're going to read an email today from Joe. Also, Phage. I think that is an episode that definitely a lot of people were interested in, connected with, and that has driven a good deal of our feedback. So why don't you hit us up?
Alrighty, so this is from Joe. This is again regarding Phage, which is an episode I think that will eventually, like, just from time to time, always hit our email inbox because there's so much to say about it.
It's a hard one to forget, and there's a lot to talk about. Yeah.
Hey, John and Norm, loved your episode this week. I also love this episode of Voyager. I think that you both hit the nail on the head with the morals. One clearly being, how far would you go to save your species? The Vidiians clearly crossed a line in some time ago and are now accustomed to the line they've crossed. I imagine, especially with what we will see of them later, that it was a difficult decision at first that became easier with time. The second meaning of the episode relates to quality of life. At what point is being alive not living? For some, they desperately cling to life no matter the cost. For others, not being able to live as they choose is enough to quit on life altogether. This is a huge debate in medical ethics today. How far do we go to preserve life? And thus, both morals join together. The difference between what the Vidiians do and what our crew does in the end ultimately has to do with choice. Kes chose to give up a lung for Neelix, where Neelix did not choose to give up his lung to save the Vidiian. Now, to address the comments that you made during your program, first, you mentioned many times the quote from the Vidiian about how it must be hard to understand how a civilized species can come to this. Knowing what I do of humanity, I do understand how a species could make the choices that the Vidiians do, but I consistently expect better from humanity. This often leads to disappointment, but I think that as soon as we stop expecting the best from others, we begin to excuse the bad behavior and choices. You also addressed Janeway's choice. I have to say that I agree with John's perspective, but understand Norm's. Also, I acknowledge that at the end, Norm said he'd agree either way. In my opinion, the choice she made to show mercy and not take a life to save another is what ultimately solved the problem. Had she made the choice to forcibly take the lung, as we discovered later, it wouldn't have worked anyway, especially since we certainly wouldn't have been getting any help from the Vidiian medical officer. However, Janeway's moral choice to spare the Vidiian's life inspired him to want to help her in return. I think it's a good illustration how taking the moral high ground is difficult, but in the long run, making those choices ends up working out better anyway. Just my opinion anyway. Until next time, Joe.
Oh man, Joe, I really like this email.
Really well done.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
not just
well
because
written.
you said that you liked us and you agreed with me.
Well, that's the well done part.
Yeah,
right?
that part definitely well done. No, I really like this because it so clearly illustrates with a couple of things. First of all, I just want to throw your words right back at you. I consistently expect better from humanity. And that is sometimes a very challenging thing to do, but it is such a necessary thing to do. And I think what you're finding here by stating that and by reiterating Janeway's choice, that is such a core principle of Star Trek, is doing the right thing even when it is the very hard thing to do, because the principle is so important to honor and to live up to. Go ahead, Norm.
If I may interrupt, John, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from A Moral Star Part 1 from Prodigy, when Jankum Pog says, "Why does it feel like we lost?" And then Dal said, "It's because we chose to do the right thing." That is one of the best written lines of any Star Trek episode ever.
If people aren't watching Prodigy and listening to Mission Log Prodigy that you do so brilliantly with Ashley Robinson,
It's really Ashley's brilliant.
Well, no, but that show is just it's so good and it is so Star Trek. And yeah, I've encountered people who I'm shocked that they're not watching Prodigy, so they need to for sure. But yeah, I want to go back to this email because Joe, your discussion, the things that you point out are the central tragedies of this episode. The tragedy of the Vidiians getting to this breaking point where they've decided they have to slowly compromise everything that made them a great culture to the point then that they are unrecognizable, literally and figuratively, from who they were. And we can sympathize. We can say, like, okay, well, if the choice is that you all die out and your civilization dies with you, is that a good choice too? Well, probably not. But do you have a third option? Do you have a fourth option? Do you have something else you can do that then doesn't force you to compromise every single value that you have? And maybe forces you to look at what you're asking here, which is, what is a life anyway? What is the quality of that life lived if 90% of your time you're looking to just steal somebody else's organs? How can that possibly be beneficial or productive or a fair representation of your values?
Right. And I really wish that there could have been maybe some wiggle room where, say, the Vidiians tried communicating first. They said, you know what, we tried reaching out to other species. Then they wouldn't help us. They wanted nothing to do with us for fear of catching our disease. I get that. Right. I mean, that's just the paranoia of the circumstance. So yes, there is a little bit of a wiggle room here to understand the plight of the Vidiians. But I do like how Joe is boiling it down to like this kind of like the Venn diagram of these moral choices. And I think that in the middle of it, you're absolutely right, Joe. As humanity and as fans of Star Trek, what we're looking at here is, how do we not lose sight of always looking towards the best of humanity? How do we get there? How do we maintain that? How do we keep that consistent? How do we stay connected with that? And in the end, I think that, it's a question of, do we believe that we're going to get to that same society that Gene Roddenberry believes we were going to get to in 1966?
Well, and as a good mirror, this episode makes you, the audience, go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, but if things were that hard, if things were so bad that my survival depended on it, would I go that way with the Vidiians? Would I compromise myself in order to just stay alive? Or would I realize better of myself, hopefully, and not do that? This is... That's what I love about this episode. It's like there's so much going on in this that is sort of not inconsequential, but there's a lot of just sort of like waiting. But then when you get to this end, when you get to this reveal about what's going on and Janeway's tortured decision, it's so damn good. And it absolutely just drives home everything that is important about this show. All right. Write to us. You know what to do. You find us here at YouTube on the Roddenberry Prod channel or Roddenberry Entertainment. Like and subscribe to that playlist for Mission Log Engage. And then send us your comments, missionlog@roddenberry.com, or on Twitter and Facebook @MissionLogPod. Remember, we may engage with your comments on the air.